Yeah, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises and the glory to Yahweh Bashmi Al Shabbat Shema Wadash. Double honor to the apostles of Great Millstone and salute to the Akim out there that's pushing this truth in all sincerity. Shalom. And I want to read into this article here. And it says, Viva la Brexit, EU panic. I'm going to just jump right into it. Brexit campaigners join with the Brexit party in threat to the bloc. And it says, Brexit campaigners have teamed up with former Brexit Party MEPs to celebrate the UK's departure from from the European Union and lead the battle to ensure France follows them outside of the Brussels blocks. France's Popular Republican Union, UPR, politician Charles Henri Gallois joined a former Brexit Party MEPs last week to celebrate Brexit Day in the Westminster Arms in London. The French Eurosceptic launched this battle against the European Union to lead France out of the Brussels bloc and follow Britain's example. In a video posted by Mr. Gallois on Twitter, the French politician thanks the Brexit Party, Alexandre Philippe, and Brexiteers in the room for paving the way for other countries in the EU to leave the bloc. He can be heard saying, Brexit is a victory for you, and I want to celebrate it with you, but I think it's a victory for all of the Democrats across Europe. And actually, Brexit is the first step towards Frexit and the Telexit. I really want to thank you because you showed all of Europe, so thank you. Viva la Brexit, viva la Frexit. So I read this to say this is that being that Britain left the EU is now influencing the other nations that are part of the EU to leave the EU bloc. And, this just reverts all the way back to prophecy. Now, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to read Daniel 7. Now, I'll read Daniel 7, then I'll go to Daniel chapter 2. But before I read those scriptures that I have already and prepared, what I would like to get is this scripture here. I believe is in Isaiah 19. This is Mark chapter 3 verse 25. And if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. Verse 26. And if Satan rise up against himself and be divided, he cannot stand, but have an end. And that's exactly what's happening. There's an end that's happening of this empire, and it's all building up to the second coming of the Messiah, because the Messiah is going to really end this empire. But little with little, even when you have these nations, and the main nation that have left is Britain, and also has influenced the French to do the same thing. And all this is going to lead to, as I'm going to say again, little with little, to the deterioration of this whole entire society as a whole. And it's all leading to prophecy. And what does prophecy state? Prophecy states in the book of Daniel's. Now, what I'm going to do before I get Daniel chapter 2, I want to read Daniel 7. We're going to read all the way down of these empires, and we're going to go through this whole entire thing through the Spirit. So this is Daniel 7 verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and a vision of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea. And four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Now, this is talking about the Assyrian Empire. And then you also had another empire that came after this one, which was known as the Babylonian Empire. And this is why it changed. And it says, I beheld until the wings thereof were plucked. And that's all that changed, is that the wings were plucked. It was the same line, because it was the same group of people that called themselves by a different name. And they called themselves Babylonians. Okay. And it was lifted up from the earth, and and made stand upon the feet of it, as a man. and a man's heart was given to, and that man was Nebuchadnezzar, the king, the Assyrian king, which was the king of Babylon. So this is verse 5, and behold, another beast, a second like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and then had three ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. Now, this empire is talking about the Medo-Persian Empire. And this is why it says, that's why it says, and it raised up itself on one side, because on one side you had the Medes ruling along with the Persians. Okay? And they came together to conquer these three lands or nations within these lands. And this is why it says, and it had the three ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And those three ribs represent those three lands that they have taken over, which is Egypt, Babylon, and Lydia. And they said unto it, arise and devour much flesh. In other words, conquer these lands. Verse 6, after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and the dominion was given unto it. Now, this empire is talking about the ancient Greece empire. And the first one that was to spearhead the ancient Greece empire was Alexander the Great, but we call him the Creep. And then he reigned for 12 years, died, passed on, and you had the 4 generals, which you can read that in the book of Daniel, the 11th chapter. But you also have the research on the history on that of the empire of ancient Greece to find it out. So anyway, let's move on. It says, hold on, wait there. Yeah, let me read this. Excuse me. I'm skipping. And it says, the beast that had also 4 heads, and dominion was given unto it. Right, I've read that already. Verse 7, and after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. Now, this is talking about the ancient Roman Empire, which was a great empire, and so much so that you had nations that came that tried to override the Roman Empire and take it over, but it just wasn't time for it to be taken down. And this is why power was given to the ancient Romans. And the Lord pretty much gave Esau the ability, in other words, to maximize the sword. And that's how the Roman Empire was so great. Every nation that came up against it, it was able to take it down. Like you had the Carthaginian people that try to take down Rome, and other nations as well. But that's just the nation that comes to my mind. All right. And the empire that we're living in right now is the other half of it. So like I was saying, this empire was strong exceedingly, and they had great iron teeth. And what does it mean by that they had great iron teeth? Because the Roman soldiers, they would wear iron-like clothing, okay, which was the strongest piece of metal that one can use. And every nation that came against it, it devoured it, because it was the Roman Empire expanded its military, and it also expanded its empire, and it became a great empire, beginning with Augustus Caesar and onwards to all of the other heads that kept it going. And then eventually the Roman Empire collapsed, and then amongst that you had Jake that came up in those powerful positions in ancient Rome, and they took it over. And this is why you also know history of the Middle Ages today, which came after the Roman system. So let's read this again. Verse 7. After this I saw in the night vision, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue of the feet of it, which is talking about the million Jews. No, excuse me, because 1 million Jews fled into Africa, but it's talking about the remnant of the Jews, which is our people at the time 2,000 years ago, that got stuck in the city of Jerusalem due to the besiegement of Jerusalem, they all died. And it was ended by the Roman military power structure, which the one that was responsible for that. Now you had a Jake that was behind that whole situation, but the people that have actually besieged Jerusalem and put an end to it was Titus and Domitian and Vespasian. They were responsible for destroying Jerusalem, and also so much so the people as well. Because Yahushua told the Jews at the time to leave the city. When you see the desolation coming towards you, the abominations and desolations coming towards you, leave the city. You can read that in Matthew 24. I'm roughly paraphrasing what he said. But he told the Israelites at the time and prophesied that, look, there was going to come a time that the city of Jerusalem was literally going to be besieged. But the ones of them stayed in there, and they got exactly the business of not listening to what Yahushua told them, and they all died in there. But you had a remnant, 1 million of them fled and were scattered abroad into other areas. And that's something that you can read in the, the Babylon and Timbuktu book. So that's it on that. So it says, and it was diverse from all of the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Now the 10 horns is talking about the 10 nations that make up the Roman Empire. And dealing with the Roman Empire as it stands right now, I don't mean to fast forward, because even back then you had certain nations that within what you would call the EU today, because there was no such thing as the EU in ancient Rome, but you had these same lands or these same Edomites that came together to formulate what was known as the Roman Empire. They called themselves by the different names, but nowadays, this is what they're calling themselves now. So these are the 10 common markets of the EU. All right. So now what I would like to do, I'm going to back out of here and I'm going to continue to read where I left off at. In the book of, where we at? Daniel's the 7th chapter. So let's continue on. And I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, and before whom there were 3 of the first horn plucked up by the root. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. Now this is talking about America, because America came out of Great Britain. And this is why it says in the book of Revelations, it says that the 8th horn came out of the 7th, which America is the 8th coming out of the 7th horn. And this is why it also says in scripture that your mother that bare you shall be so confounded. Because eventually what's going to happen is something's going to take place where England is going to disagree with what America's done. And also those that make up the EU, okay? Those that were part of the EU, because you have nations that are looking towards leaving the EU, within the EU, looking to leave the EU, such as France. So these countries are going to come together, according to Revelations the 17th chapter, and they're going to shoot at her the missiles. All right. So let's read verse 8 again so I can recap on my train of thought. It says, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horn plucked up by the root. Now the 3 that were plucked up by the root is talking about the Spanish, the French, and the British. Now, in order for you to find that out, you have to also, do a little bit of research on the American Revolutionary Wars that took place. And that's how you'll find that kind of history out. So that's all I have to say on that. And now I'm going to continue on. And it says, and this horn were the eyes like the eyes of man. And see, if I break it all the way down, we're going to be here all day. So just to make it short, to the point, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So it says, in this horn were the eyes like the eyes of man, and the mouth speaking great things, which is America, because America speaks great things, and they boast of themselves, of their weapons of war, and the technology that they have, belonging to those weapons of war that they have. So that's how they're speaking great things. A mouth speaking great things, excuse me. So that's it on that. So now I want to get to the main scripture at hand, which is dealing with the EU now. And we're going to read the book of Daniel's, the second chapter now. We're going to start with Daniel's 2, verse 41. It says, and whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay, and part of iron, and the kingdom shall be divided, because the time that we're in right now, we're in a time of the 10 toes, which make up the Roman Empire, which is the other half or the last part of the Roman Empire. Let me put it that way. So let's read on. But there shall be in it the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, and the toes of the feet were a part of iron and the part of clay. So the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And this is why in verse 41 it says iron mixed with clay or miry clay. The iron representing on how you have certain countries within the EU that are far more superior economically and militarily versus those of the weak, all right, such as Great Britain, Germany. And those are the two countries that the French. These are the three countries that are a lot more stronger than the rest of them. And then you also have the weak. You have the Spanish, you have the Italians, and you have Denmark and the likes. These are what you call inferior of the nations that make up the EU. All right, so it says, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken, as I've explained. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, or as I'm going to explain, shall be partly strong and partly broken. Verse 43, and whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. Because when Britain was in the EU, had a large occupancy of people just in London alone, so much so that the people that were raised and born in London were complaining about it. Okay, and like the Apostle Gabar, he pretty much went into it on how Benjamin went to England to rebuild the city of London because London was pretty much wholly destroyed. So they were sent. The Benjamites were sent to build back England, and then also Elam, or should I say, Britain got involved in the affairs of Elam, and Elam sought themselves to be in England, and all of the nations that were part of the British experience, some way or the other, decided to live in Britain eventually, and that pretty much led to the issues of the British Edomites in terms of complaining about the immigration problem. Okay, but going back to the original point now, I want to make, when Great Britain was in the EU, you had a lot of these European countries that flocked into Great Britain because Britain is obviously the greatest of all of the European countries. And that's why people flocked to it, and that's why it was so heavily populated. But the main reason why, as Apostle Gabar said, the reason why Britain wanted to leave the EU because the people had an issue with the immigration. And that was the main problem. But dealing with it from a government standpoint of view, the government wanted to leave the EU due to having access to the Gibraltar. All right. And that's another video for another time. Lord willing, I'll get there. But so yeah, let's go back to this right here. We're going to read verse 43. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the Most High of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. And now this is why in the book of Revelations, the 12th chapter, it reads, it speaks on how Yahweh Shai is going to come. And, or should I say, and this is why when you read the book of Revelations, this is why when you read the book of Revelations, the 12th chapter now, we'll start from verse 7, where it talks about the war in heaven, because exactly that's what's going to happen. Michael and the archangels and Yahweh Shai is going to come in the midst. And so you know what? But I might as well read it. And this is why it says in the book of Revelations, the 12th chapter and the 7th verse. Let me read this. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. And what is that dragon? The dragon is talking about this Roman system that we're under right now. And the dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world, and he was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So this is talking about the war of heaven. Now, as I've just read to you, and even also in the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter, after you get done reading these empires, Daniel is now speaking about the Most High, the Ancient of Days. So why is he speaking about the Ancient of Days before he got done speaking about these empires? Because that's what's coming next. What's coming next is that they're going to be destroyed. All of these nations are going to be consumed, and all of these nations are going to be under the nation of Israel. That's who's next in line to rule. All right. And this is why the 44th verse in Daniel's 2nd chapter also speaks about a kingdom that shall consume all of the other kingdoms, because this kingdom is going to be spearheaded by Yahweh Shai. And like I said, now we're going to go back to Revelations 12. And this is why Revelations 12 speaks about the war in heaven, as I've just read all the way down. All right, because you're going to have Michael, the archangel, and Yahweh Shai and the angels surrounding them, and they're going to fight against the Edomites, those that make up the EU, and those of the nations that want to fight up against the Lord, because you're going to have a space war that's going to occur. This is why you'll find articles nowadays dealing with the idea of a space war happening. Okay? You have satellites in space, and they're watching out of unnecessary objects that are to appear. Much more now than ever so before. And this is why Esau, they're keeping their eyes on the so-called UFOs, as we call them, the so-called UFOs, because they're us. They're what you call identifiable flying objects. We can identify with these things because these things are spoken of in the scriptures, and these things are going to deliver us out of our captivity. Being that we're the Israelites, as the Israelites were delivered in ancient Egypt, so shall we be delivered in this society. But going back to the point of the matter of this video, as you see, you can see that this society is breaking down and deteriorating, and the EU splitting up, or should I say the countries that are splitting from the EU, that's an indication of this society being cast down little and little. That's the only word I could use, brothers, so bear with me, So little and little, that's an indication of this society deteriorating little and little. But the end of this society, or this world of Esau, is going to be when they fight against Yahweh Shai and they get turned to powder and smoke and dust. That's going to be the end of this world. And by the ruins of this world, it's going to begin the kingdom of heaven, aka the kingdom of Israel, Yasharallah. All right. So with that, I'm going to close out and end out with this. Hopefully you brothers were edified on this video. And I'm closing out and I say shalom.